everyone, Christina here. Welcome to day 14 of the holiday card series for 2015. Today I'm using the Happy Merry Messages stamp set from Hero Arts and Leah Griffith. This is a really great stamp set with tons of words and little elements that you can combine together to create your own greetings. So I'm using the Merry Christmas stamp as well as the little banner stamp that says to you and yours. I'm going to be embossing these and I wanted to stamp them together, so I've mounted them together on my compact stamp press. I'm embossing on some cardstock vellum today. This vellum is from Bazzill and it's 40 pounds, so it's thicker than your usual vellum. I've prepped the vellum using my EK Success powder tool, and now I'm stamping in Versamark ink. I'm going to go ahead and stamp this twice. I'm going to make this card twice today. I thought since it's such a simple design for a card, it'd be really easy to go ahead and duplicate these at the same time. So I'm going to create two cards and just change up the colors on each. I'm using some rich pale gold metallic embossing powder from WOW, and I'm just heat setting that. And I'm going to go ahead and die cut these after I have them embossed. I'm going to be using a 2.5-inch circle. This circle die is from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm using a small bit of Post-it tape to hold that die in place while I run it through my Big Shot machine. So I'll just put that through, and then you'll see how pretty it is with the circle. I just really love this gold embossing powder. It's my favorite gold embossing powder. I wanted to add a gold edge around this circle piece, so I'm rubbing my Versamark ink pad along the edge of this circle die cut. And then I'm taking some gold embossing powder and applying it to the edges. And at first I just dipped it in, and then I thought, oh, it might be easier to sprinkle the gold embossing powder on top. So then I started sprinkling it on, and of course it went on way too thick. I didn't want that thick of a border. So I'm going to take a dry paintbrush. Just a really small dry paintbrush. You can use whatever you have on hand. And I'm going to wipe away some of that embossing powder. The thing that's really cool about doing this is that it's going to leave behind little tiny bits of embossing powder from where the brush was. And it's going to give it almost like a faded look after you emboss. And you'll be able to see that. I'll give you a close-up view of them in a minute here. So I'm heat setting that with my heat tool until everything's melted. And then I went on to the other piece so that I could keep embossing. And with this one, I decided that instead of sprinkling the embossing powder on, I would just dip the edges of the circle die cut into that gold embossing powder. And it did seem to put it on there a little bit more cleanly. I still had to take a brush to it and clean off some of the thicker areas, but it was slightly easier to do it this way. So I'm just going to take my paintbrush, my dry paintbrush once again, and just wipe away some of that embossing powder. After I've heat set that one, I'll show you a close-up of what they look like, and you'll be able to see how pretty it is. I did run into a slight problem with this whole method of embossing though, and that is that banner greeting on the very bottom, the embossing powder just sort of filled in the words. It wasn't very clean and you could barely tell what it said. So I realized I would have to do something on top of it in order to get that to work. This one you can sort of read it a little bit more, but I didn't like how illegible that it was. So I took that same stamp and I stamped it onto some white cardstock. This is Neenah Solar white cardstock, and I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This is a really nice crisp ink, and I'm going to be able to keep those words and have them look really nice. I then trimmed them out, not leaving any edge around that area, and then I took a black brush tip marker and I painted the edges of the cardstock. This is going to make the white core of the white cardstock look black, and it makes it look like I've cut it out perfectly. I took some Tombow Mono Multi Glue and put that right on top of that gold embossed banner, and then I put that new black and white greeting over the top, and I offset it slightly so that it looks like that gold is a shadow underneath that black banner. And I really like how this looks. It looks really sharp and everything's legible and you can read it. So I'm going to go ahead and work on the backgrounds for the card, and that's where I'm going to be making each card a different color. I'm using some Winsor & Newton watercolors today. And first I'm going to wet down the entire background with some water. I'm going to keep my background very soft. It's not going to have any hard edges. So it helps to have some water down on the cardstock first, or on the watercolor paper. I'm going to use some different reds and pinks and yellows on this side here. And I wanted to mention to you that I'm using some Strathmore cold press watercolor paper. And the brush I'm using today is actually one from Silver. It's a Silver Black Velvet round number 4 that I'm using right now. I'll eventually switch to more of a flat brush. The brush type for this doesn't really matter as much as just making sure you're keeping those horizontal strokes as you apply the color. After I had the pink and yellow version on the left, I did the same on the right side, except this time I used blues and greens. And I started out with more of a pale blue at the top, but you'll see here in a minute that I eventually darkened that up. So I'm adding a nice intense green, and then I'll bring in some yellow. And I really love these two colors together. This green and this yellow together makes a nice lemony lime yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and keep applying that color on there until all of those areas were about the color that I wanted. The top, like I said before, was a little bit too pale, so I did darken it up with some more colors, just because I know that as this dries, it's going to dry back even more. So I hit that with my heat tool to speed up the drying process, and then I brought in more layers of color. And you really could have just gone straight in with these more intense colors to begin with, but I find that putting a bottom layer of color just gives everything more depth, and it has a little bit more of an interesting blending of colors because it has those colors underneath. So I'm adding more of that red and pink and adding some yellow on top as well. The areas where I want them to blend, I'm sort of working my brush over that area a couple times because I want those colors to mix on the paper. And I want it to fade out to white, so I'm just adding just a tiny bit more yellow, and then I'm going to bring in a bunch of water and let that fade out to the bottom. So I tipped my board here just to get those colors blending a little bit more. And I'm going to wipe over those areas to try to get the colors to blend. Brought down that red color down into the yellow so it turned a little bit more orange. Really like how it blended into that yellow. I'm going to do the same thing over on the other side. I just added those same colors over the top, trying to intensify the colors. And then at the very bottom, adding a little bit of yellow and then fading it out to white. Did one more swipe going all the way up to get those colors to blend. I then used my heat tool to go ahead and speed up the drying process once again. And then I was able to remove the background pieces from my board here. So I trimmed them down to about the length that I needed for the front of my card. And now I'm using these Next Level embossing folders from We Are Memory Keepers. These are really, really interesting embossing folders because they emboss really deeply and they have almost like a 3D effect. It's a little bit of a different look than normal embossing folders. And I think they look particularly nice when you use one color of cardstock or kind of like a blended look like this. I think it looks really, really cool. So I'm going to use a different embossing folder on the pink and red and yellow one. This does kind of like a quilted pattern. I think it looks really, really pretty. And I'm going to go ahead and place that in the embossing folder and then run that through my Big Shot machine once again. I really love how this watercolor paper works with these Next Level embossing folders because there's no cracking of paper. Sometimes you can get a little bit of cracking with normal cardstocks, but this watercolor paper embosses beautifully. So I'm adhering these two pieces onto an A2 card. I've cut the watercolor pieces down to 4 inches wide by 5 1/4 tall and then put some foam adhesive on the back. In order to adhere the vellum circle pieces, I took a tiny bit of Ranger Multi-Medium Matte and ran around the outside edge right behind that gold embossing. And then I also added some adhesive behind the gold banner or gold and black banner. I added some little dots behind some of the letters. And this is going to add just enough adhesive to make this stick onto the front of this card. So I'm using my tweezers to help get that in place and pressing that down. And then I'm going to grab an acrylic block, a really large acrylic block, and I'm just placing that over the top so that it presses everything down and it has a chance to dry. Did the same thing on the other card, added some adhesive behind the gold areas and then pressed that down and added another acrylic block over top. And I let these dry for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. It dried fairly quickly. So that is the card, or cards, I should say, for today. I hope you guys enjoyed day 14 of the holiday card series. I will be back on Wednesday for day 15. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching until the very end of today's video. On screen are 6 more card inspiration videos for you to check out, and they are all from the 6 previous years of the holiday card series. You can visit my blog at kwernerdesign.com, and you can also catch me on social media at Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Once again, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video.